Thanks for coming, and hopefully this will be a really useful day. My idea in organising this, and it's taken a long time to organise it, is that it will be a start of a series of events that we do that will hopefully allow us to actually work on parts of our work and submissions, so hopefully kind of supporting to complete stuff rather than just hearing about stuff that's already been completed, which has been a problem for me, I think. I'd really like to welcome Professor Christopher Fox from Brunel. He's going to be talking to us this morning, and Andy Lavender is going to be joining us later in the day. And I'm really glad that both of them have been able to come and speak. Again, that's been a kind of slightly long process to find a date that we can all do, but I think that this is going to be really interesting and useful, so thanks for coming. So I'm going to do a kind of really boring administrative introduction, which is basically just to say why I want to do this and what we might get out of it, and perhaps just contextualise this a bit, because not universally, but there is some, I think, issues of misunderstanding or feeling like there is a disjunct between what we're asked to do by the university in terms of submitting for ref and what we actually do on a day-to-day basis as researchers and creative artists. And so in terms of the centre, these are the things that kind of imply to me that we might do something like this. In terms of promoting innovative research, so perhaps finding ways to do something that is going beyond what we're doing already, and particularly thinking about the kind of national and international reach of that research, and also thinking about documentation and dissemination, which can be a problem, particularly for those of us who do events that might be ephemeral or produce things that might not easily be uploaded to an archive, for example. So this is, let's just get all the negative stuff out of the way first. Rachel Hahn, who gave a presentation last year at our centre conference, talked about the idea that portfolios in ref submissions tend to be closed boxes, so things that we can't see the contents of, and also potentially are projects that are created for the ref. So nobody sees that as a complete project apart from the assessors, and that can be an issue. And I agree with her. She's not saying we shouldn't make them, but she's saying that's a problem. Bruce Brown, talking in 2015, noted that some portfolio submissions across the creative arts as a whole had the feel of a kind of CV rather than a kind of independent project, and he thought that that was an issue as well. So that's something potentially to move away from. And there is the perception that this is more of an administrative task than actually a kind of research-led way of thinking about producing something. So if you have time on your hands, you may want to read the overview of Subpanel D, but I've read it so you don't have to. And the things that I wanted to note from this, firstly, are that there are 4 panels where practice research is specifically spoken about in the report, so where this is a kind of main and accepted mode of submission for people. So that's 29, which includes creative writing, 34, which is fine art, music, performing arts, and 36, which has media, but it also has this kind of appendix which is like media and other, which is perhaps helpful or unhelpful. But what you can see from that is that already the idea of a portfolio submission is not necessarily just tied to practice. So I had a look at some portfolio submissions in library studies, some that come under area studies, which really is the academic expression for just other. And so that's perhaps a newer way of thinking about presenting research, which I think could be interesting. And also all of those subpanels noted that work that they assessed was actually interdisciplinary across subpanels. So already there's an idea as well that the portfolio submission might kind of express something that's beyond a single discipline. So lots of quotes from this report, but really some to be positive about. First of all, that as a whole, it notes that practice research is in a thriving state, and this research is highly important and influential, both nationally and internationally. So there's already a recognition that this is important work that has been doing. It's not just an appendix to other research. And the REF panel thought that the UK shows international leadership in terms of development of practice as research, and certainly in my discipline that's a discussion that I see going on, that really the UK is a much more of a centre of this type of work than anywhere else at the moment, with perhaps some emerging centres in Europe. And they described it as innovative, collaborative, cross-disciplinary and cross-cultural, as well as exploring the potential for digital technologies. And in that sentence there's lots of things that I kind of already associate with work that I know that people are doing here, so definitely that chimes with what we might want to show. And then they talk about impact within the creative industries and beyond, and again that's something that maybe could be something that we want to think about documenting more clearly in terms of how the work that we are doing is reaching beyond just the creative practice that we're involved in. I've taken these comments from panel 35 because they had perhaps the most to say about practice research. So they talked again about the international level and the range of perspectives that it looked at, and also I really liked this, that they kind of commented on a developing subfield that they saw within the panel, in particular to do with the interdisciplinary of music and film. So already the idea that these kind of divisions into groups are being noted as breaking down. So I think that's something to be positive from, because so many people here are doing interdisciplinary work. They note that the strongest submissions provided models for the international community in powerful connections forged between theoretical research, creative industries and broader publics. So again, there's kind of three criteria there that perhaps we might want to think about in terms of the theoretical side of the research that we do, the creative industries that we work in, and also the people who meet and experience our research. And panel 36, they pointed out that in fact many submissions didn't necessarily explicitly call the research interdisciplinary, and that was because they felt that it was so obvious that interdisciplinary research was a way that people would be conducting the work that they were doing. It wasn't necessarily worthy of comment in and of itself, so they're saying basically a lot of this research is already crossing those boundaries. There were some negatives though, and I guess that I see these as things to look out for, and certainly I think that these are comments that could be applied to work that I've done. Firstly, the panel said that in the 300-word statement that were written, particularly in practice research projects, the question of the research imperative was not always well articulated. So that came across in projects which may have been very good in and of themselves, but the researcher hadn't necessarily done the work of explaining what the question was of that project. And I think that's something that's worth being aware of. And also that some projects were using practice to illustrate research knowledge gained in other ways, as opposed to presenting the practice output itself as the medium through which the knowledge was gained and disseminated. And really I think that to me demonstrates that the understanding of what practice research is very well embedded within the research, the REF panel, and so they do understand how practice research is conducted and what it will look like, but perhaps sometimes people are presenting their work in a different way. And from discussions that I've had in many different occasions, it seems like people are afraid that lack of understanding will cause negative judgment of their work, and perhaps this results in this kind of submission where they show practice as illustrating something rather than actually doing it itself.
Lauren, I think that really, really beautifully articulates the tension really between having to, as it were, talk about a question and then research which inevitably goes beyond the question, which generates questions which were previously unexpected.
Absolutely.
I think that, it's not a solvable thing, but it really seems, for me at least, to sort of articulate an innate tension really that is building up in this area.
Yeah, I mean I agree with that, and I think that one of the issues there is potentially the idea of linearity, that within some research methods there's a very clear linearity between, research question, methodological design, enactment and conclusions, and practice research projects don't have that linearity. But I think, exactly as you're saying, that questions may emerge. That 300-word statement needn't be this is what I set out to do and this is how I do it, but perhaps there are things to be explored there into how to kind of express those emerging questions. So I absolutely agree with that. And I think also where they're saying to allow the output to be judged on its own terms, that says to me that they're looking to the practice for the answers rather than to kind of ephemera around it, which I find quite encouraging, basically. So this is the positives that I took from that, and this is why I think that thinking about portfolios in particular might be helpful for us. Firstly, highlighting interdisciplinary and collaborative elements of research, which I know are very, very important to a lot of people in the centre, that was able to come through a lot more in a portfolio than necessarily in a co-authored output. So it's an extended platform where things like research questions and research narratives, and I know that Andy's going to talk a lot about narrative this afternoon, can be expressed. And so I think Brian's point as well about how some things may be emerging within a project, that narrative can be important to explain how that's happened. Where they're talking about connecting theory, practice and community. Again, I think that's really important in this work, that it's not just being done in a kind of closed university building, and the portfolio can express that, and also that they can expose the process of the research as well as its product. So those are all the kind of positives that I think mean that creating portfolios can really help us with our work. So in terms of the centre then, these are the kind of things that we might want to be doing with respect to ref outputs and the things that we could help you with in terms of developing your work. So firstly, things around documenting and disseminating research questions, research imperatives and narratives. And having been in quite a lot of PhD vivas recently for practice, one question that people are asked very frequently is, what was the impetus for the research? And that seems to be something that was missing in a lot of those projects. And then when that was described, it seemed to contextualise the research in a way that perhaps was missing before. To promote rigour and perhaps to even decide on what rigour might mean within these portfolios. To think about highlighting the originality and significance of the work that's being done by colleagues. And again, I don't think that we're in a position where work that is done is not original or not significant, but perhaps we can be better at explaining how those things are evidenced. And also to think about the development of this to greater local, national and international networks, and certainly that's something that the centre should be a platform for. Okay, so today this is what I want to do. I hope that we'll work on aspects of presentation and writing around the current projects that we're doing, to think about issues around documentation and archiving, and Andy's going to talk to us a bit about that, and Claire as well, and to think about developing research narratives of our work, and perhaps also to share across disciplines. I'm such an advocate for interdisciplinary practice because some of the best things that I have learned have not come from music, and I think that sometimes we're kind of struggling away with questions that other people have dealt with quite well, but perhaps, in terms of this university, just in a different building and using a different spreadsheet. And so also just some things that I want to say for the future. Firstly, we'll talk about create a bit later. Please put the centre as the origin of your work alongside your school, and that helps us to promote it. So that also gives an impression for the university of how much creative practice work is actually being created, because I think at the moment they don't have an idea about how many people are doing this work and how much they actually create. At the end of today, I would be really interested in your feedback, particularly on what you think would help you more with your work and what you would like the centre to do as we go forward. And also things that you may or may not know about. We're running 4 projects at the moment. 2 small research projects which are about digital dissemination. At the moment that's looking at how can the website be better. I'm sure we agree that it can be a lot better, and how can we effectively share some of the things that we've done already. and also looking at methodology and particularly creating methodological resources for PhD students and early career researchers. We have a research assistant who's Sophie, and she's working on both of those projects. We've also got 2 pilot documentation projects around nonlinear documentation, which Andy will speak about. One involving Brian's work and one involving Panos's work. So hopefully we'll have some results of that by the beginning of next year. And also, we're really interested in projects that you think we might do in order to investigate things. So we really talked to someone who was talking about an app for the centre. At the moment, I don't really have an idea of what that would be or how it might work, but I think that these are things that are worth exploring and thinking about, so please talk to us about that. So that's pretty much all of the sort of dreadfully administrative things that I want to say. But what I hope is that although REF is in many ways administrative, what we can do is foster a way of working that includes a lot more sharing of our work, a lot more discussion of our work between ourselves, and hopefully then the development of really good projects that will be great for REF, but will be also just really great anyway. And that's, I think, what the best outcome of that process can be. So thank you for coming to take part in this.